frozen under alien ice. The wind howled over the frozen lands of planet Zerath. Snowflakes the size of a human hand danced in the air like ghosts. The ground was solid ice, blue, thick, and deadly cold. No human or alien could survive here without strong gear and strong will. Jack Morrison stood on top of a high ice ridge, breathing heavily. His breath came out like white smoke. He was alone now. The rest of the expedition team had turned back an hour ago. The storm was too strong, but Jack had seen something strange on the scanner, a heat signature buried deep under the glacier. Could be a broken machine, his captain had said, or a frozen animal. Another laughed. But Jack had felt something else. His gut told him this wasn't just ice. Something was down there. Something alive. Jack activated his heat drill. The buzzing sound echoed through the silence. Slowly, he began melting the layers of ancient alien ice. The process was slow. Hours passed. His hands ached, and his face burned from the cold wind. Then, he saw it. Under the ice was a shape, small, humanoid, fragile. He knelt down, heart racing. No way. Through the frost, he saw pale purple skin. Long white hair spread like silk across the icy floor. Her eyes were shut. Her face was soft, peaceful, and still. "She's a girl," Jack whispered. "An alien girl?" He pressed, his hand against the ice above her chest. It was almost frozen solid. No movement, no breath. But something deep in his bones told him she wasn't gone yet. Jack worked faster. He melted the last few inches and reached her body. Carefully, he pulled her out of the ice. She was freezing cold. Her clothes were thin and torn. Her fingers looked like glass, blue and lifeless. "Come on," he said, wrapping her in a thermal blanket. He carried her into his small survival pod. It was just a metal box with heat, a bed, and a few rations. He placed her on the bed and turned up the temperature. For a moment, he just stared at her. She looked peaceful but far too cold. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her species. But she didn't deserve to die like this, frozen and forgotten. Jack boiled some water, poured it into a canteen, and placed it gently in her hands. Still no movement. He took out a tiny scanner and checked her vitals. "No heartbeat," he said. "No breathing. But, cell activity is still present." She was not alive, but not fully dead either. Something in between. Jack rubbed his hands and looked at her again. "I don't know who you are, but I won't leave you here." He placed a warm gel pack over her chest and gently rested his hand on hers. Then it happened. Her fingers twitched. Jack jumped. "Wait, did you move?" he asked, shocked. He leaned closer. Her face was still, her lips pale, but her finger moved again, just a little. Jack's heart pounded. "You're in there, aren't you?" He ran to the heater and turned it to maximum. Then he sat beside her, holding her hand. He didn't care if she was alien. She needed warmth. She needed care. As the minutes passed, her body began to thaw. Her skin went from icy blue to pale purple. Slowly, her chest rose. Barely a breath, but it was something. Outside, the wind howled louder. Snow piled against the pod like a wall. But inside, a strange peace settled in the small space. Jack looked at her and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." He didn't know why he stayed. He didn't know why he cared. But something about her felt important. As the snowstorm raged outside, Jack sat beside the frozen girl, waiting, hoping. And deep inside her, where ice still clung to her bones, a faint spark of life began to flicker once more. The storm outside had not stopped. Wind roared like a beast, shaking the pod's metal walls. But inside, everything was still, except her hand. It twitched again. Jack's eyes snapped open. He hadn't meant to fall asleep. He had been holding her hand, trying to pass his body heat to her, but now, Her fingers were curling slowly around his. She moved again. Jack whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. He leaned closer. Her skin was no longer glassy. A soft color had returned to her cheeks. Her chest rose ever so slightly, and then a sharp breath escaped her lips. She gasped, and her eyes opened. They were violet, glowing, alien, and full of fear. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. Her lips moved, but no words came out, only a soft whimper. Jack raised his hands slowly. Hey, and it's okay. You're safe. She flinched, breathing fast. Her eyes darted across the small pod. Strange place, strange smells, strange male. She didn't understand his words, but his tone was calm. His hands were gentle, and there was heat, warmth, so much warmth. She had never felt anything like it. Back on her icy homeworld, warmth was rare and sacred. Even family members shared very little touch. Cold skin meant control. Heat meant weakness. So why was this heat comforting? Jack handed her a cup. She stared at it like it was a weapon. It's water. Warm. You need it, he said softly. She blinked, then took a shaky sip. Her hands trembled, but the liquid felt like fire in her frozen chest. It didn't hurt. It healed. He watched carefully, his expression calm but curious. Can you speak? What's your name? She didn't answer. Her voice was trapped inside, like the rest of her had been, under the ice. Hours passed. Jack gave her food, wrapped her in another blanket, and kept the pod warm. She stayed quiet, watching him like a cornered animal, but she no longer feared him. When he fell asleep in the chair, her eyes stayed on him. His breath was steady. His face looked tired but kind. Why did this male save me, she thought. Her people taught her that humans were wild and dangerous, that they only wanted to conquer and destroy. But this one, he had melted her ice. Not just around her body, but around her heart too. When Jack woke up again, she was sitting up, her blanket tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes were clearer now. She looked straight at him. You saved me, she said in a soft, broken voice. Jack blinked. You speak English? She shook her head. Only some. Long ago. We were taught. Forbidden now. Jack smiled gently. Then we'll learn together. She looked confused. He pointed to himself. Jack. Then he pointed to her. After a pause, she said, Ryla. It was the first time she had spoken her name out loud in years. Back home, Ryla had no worth. She was called Ice-Faded, a useless, silent girl. But now I'd someone cared to ask. Jack smiled again. Ryla, that's beautiful. Her face turned slightly away, and for the first time she felt something warm rise in her chest. Not heat, but emotion. She touched her chest and whispered, It feels strange here. Jack nodded. That's called hope. She didn't understand the word, but she liked the sound of it. Outside, the storm had begun to quiet. Inside, two strangers sat together. No longer enemies, no longer afraid. And Ryla, born of frost and silence, felt something new inside her heart. A fire. Warmth she had never known. For the first time since she opened her eyes, Ryla smiled. It was small, uncertain, but real. Jack noticed it and grinned. That's better, he said. She didn't know the words, but she understood the feeling behind them. Their tiny shelter was quiet. The heater hummed softly. The storm outside had faded to gentle wind. Jack boiled water for soup while Ryla sat near the warm vent, fingers stretched out like she was trying to catch fire. Every few minutes, she looked at Jack. She didn't trust him fully. Not yet. But she no longer feared him. In fact, when he left her side to fetch more supplies from the storage hatch, she felt something new. Loneliness. The sky outside darkened too fast. Jack stepped out in full gear, walking carefully across the slippery ice to grab more fuel cells. But just as he reached the hatch, he froze. A deep sound rumbled in the distance. Not thunder, not machines. A howl. It echoed across the valley like a giant beast crying out in pain. Jack looked around. The wind picked up. Then snow, fast, heavy. Ran back toward the shelter, but his boots slid. Ice cracked beneath him. He barely reached the door just as the second storm slammed down. Inside, Ryla stood by the wall, feeling the vibrations. She turned as the door burst open and Jack stumbled, covered in snow, coughing. He shut the hatch with both hands shaking. "Storm's back, and it's worse than before," he said between gasps. She rushed to help him, grabbing his arms, pulling him in, brushing ice off his shoulders. Her hands were still weak, but full of panic. He smiled. "I'm okay. Just cold." Then she did. Something strange. She placed his hands on her own chest, right over her heart, and held them there. He blinked, unsure. She whispered, "You gave me warmth. Now, I give you." They sat together by the heat source. She wrapped one blanket around, both of them. He didn't stop her. The storm screamed outside. The wind slammed against the pod like angry fists. Snow began piling up fast, burying the shelter. But inside, it was no longer just a machine keeping them alive. It was each other. Ryla leaned her head on Jack's shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're kind. Do this often?" "What?" he asked. "Give heat. Give comfort." Jack chuckled. "Yeah, we call it being human." She stared at him. "Strange species." "Yeah," he smiled. "But we're not so bad once you get to know us." Hours passed. The temperature inside dropped slightly. One of the heater tubes hissed and died. The backup battery was failing. Jack frowned. "Not good." He stood and walked to the panel, tapping buttons. "I can fix this, just need time." But then he heard a crash. The back wall of the pod bent inward. Ice had slammed into it, hard. Another hit. The metal groaned. If it broke, they would freeze within minutes. Jack turned to her. "Stay under the blanket no matter what." "What about you?" she asked, fear in her voice. "I'll hold the door. Just stay warm." But she didn't listen. When the next gust hit and the pod groaned again, she crawled to his side and grabbed his hand. "No more alone," she said firmly. He looked into her violet eyes. Something in her had changed. She was no longer a broken girl pulled from ice. She was a survivor. And now, his partner. Together, they braced the door with tools and crates. Together, they sat close, wrapped in the last bit of warmth. Outside, the storm raged louder than ever. But inside, two hearts beat stronger, united not by words, but by shared breath and quiet courage. The storm had locked them inside. Outside, the snow buried the shelter inch by inch. No light, no sound, just the weight of frozen silence pressing down from all directions. Inside, something else was happening. Something warmer. Something strange. Jack sat against the wall, his body aching from hours without rest. Ryla sat beside him, her head gently resting on his shoulder. She no longer shivered. Her body, once stiff like stone, had started to relax. Her hand moved again, this time not from pain, but by choice. She reached up and touched his cheek. "Your skin," she whispered. "It burns." Jack smiled. "That's called body heat. Normal for humans." She pulled her hand back and stared at her fingers like they belonged to someone else. "I never felt this before." Jack turned toward her. "Your people don't share warmth?" "No. Touch is weakness. Fire is danger. Cold is control." She looked down, her voice quieter now. "But your fire, it does not burn me. It melts." Jack didn't answer. He just looked at her. Really looked. She was unlike anything he had ever known. Her face still carried alien features, high cheekbones, faintly glowing veins under her skin, sharp lines around her jaw. But her eyes, those violet eyes, were soft now, open, vulnerable. Ryla noticed him watching and smiled awkwardly. "Why do you look at me like that?" Jack chuckled. "Because you're surprising. You should be dead. Instead, you're sitting here talking like we've known each other forever." She thought about that, then nodded. "It feels like a memory I forgot." Jack handed her a small music device. "Here, something from Earth." She took the headphones and listened. Soft piano notes played, gentle and full of emotion. Her eyes widened. "What is this feeling in my chest?" Jack leaned in. "We call it emotion. It's too much. That's how you know it's real." Later, she found a mirror inside the med kit. She studied her reflection, touching her face. "I don't recognize this person." "You look fine," Jack said. She turned to him. "I look alive." As time passed, the shelter became their little world. Jack taught her basic English words. She repeated them slowly, laughing. When she got them wrong, he made jokes. She didn't always understand, but she smiled anyway. They shared food, warmth, and sometimes silence. But it was never cold anymore. One night, Jack woke up to find her sitting very close. Too close. Her body radiated faint warmth. Now a change he hadn't seen before. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Better." Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. "Our people call this spirit linking," she whispered. "I know humans do not, but I feel I must." Jack's heart beat faster. "Why?" "Because you brought me back," she said. "And something inside me wants to stay close." For a long moment they didn't move. Her breath was warm against his face. Her eyes were soft. There were no lies between them, no fear, no war. Just two lives tangled by chance, now bound by choice. Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, the ice between them had already melted, not by machines, not by heat, but by something far deeper. Trust. It started with a sound, a sharp beep, then another. Jack's eyes opened. His wrist scanner was blinking red. "Motion outside," he whispered. Ryla sat up beside him. Her glowing eyes narrowed. "Not storm?" He shook his head. "No, people." She stiffened. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Not safe. Not friends." Jack peeked through a small crack in the frozen wall. Three dark shapes moved across the snow, tall, armored, silent. They walked like hunters. "They're scanning," Jack said, backing away. "They're looking for you." Ryla's face went pale. "They're called Frost Guards. My clan sent them." "Your own people?" Jack asked in shock. "They believe I should be dead," she said softly. "They do not allow the weak to return." Jack stood up. "Then we don't open the door." But it was too late. A loud thud hit the metal. A voice came from outside, speaking in Ryla's language, cold and sharp. "Ryla of the Frosted Bloodline. You have been marked. Step out and die with honor." Ryla flinched. Jack stood in front of her. "They'll have to get through me first." She stared at him. "You don't understand. If you protect me, they'll call you cursed, tainted by warmth." Jack smirked. "Then let them be cold." The Frost Guards forced their way in. The door slammed open. Ice blew in. Snow covered the floor. Three armored aliens entered, faces hidden, weapons drawn. Their leader pointed at Jack. "Human, step away." Jack didn't move. "Step away." He grabbed a heated pipe from the stove and stood his ground. "You'll hurt her over my dead body." The leader raised his gun and fired. The beam shot forward, fast, deadly, but missed its mark. Because Ryla stepped in front of Jack, the energy blast hit her shoulder, throwing her backward. She hit the wall hard, falling to her knees. "Ryla!" Jack shouted, catching her as she collapsed. She was bleeding, but she was still alive. She looked up at the stunned guards, eyes glowing with fury and pain. "Enough," she shouted in her native tongue. "I claim him!" Silence. The guards froze. The leader lowered his weapon, shocked. "What did you say?" She struggled to her feet, leaning on Jack. "I claim him as my bonded one. My heart has melted, and it chose him." Gasps filled the pod. Bonding was sacred in her culture, unbreakable, unquestioned. To break such a claim would be blasphemy. The guards stared. Then one slowly knelt. "If it is the ancient bond, we must not harm him." The leader was furious. "She is broken. This is madness." Ryla's voice was quiet but full of strength. "Then let me be broken, but I will not leave him." Jack looked at her shocked. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she whispered. "Because you didn't leave me in the ice, I won't leave you in the fire." The guards left in silence. The door closed again, and for the first time, Ryla leaned into Jack, not for warmth, but for belonging. Outside, the wind returned, but inside the pod, something stronger remained, a bond no storm could freeze. Ryla's body felt heavy in Jack's arms. The wound on her shoulder still burned. Her blood, cool and blue, stained the floor. Jack held her tighter, fear rising in his chest. "Stay with me, please." Her eyes fluttered open, weak but full of fire. "I chose you." Jack blinked, away the snowflakes on his lashes. "You didn't have to do that, they would have killed you." She coughed softly. "Then I die for someone who gave me back my breath." He laid her gently on the bed. The heater crackled behind them, barely hanging on. The backup systems were nearly drained. No rescue, no power, just a wounded alien, girl and a tired human. Jack opened the med kit. Only 2 injectors left, one for pain, one for healing, meant for humans. Would it even work on her? He looked at her face, pale and trembling. "I don't know if this will help you, but I'll try." She nodded weakly. He injected the serum into her side. For a second, nothing happened. Then her body jerked, her chest arched upward, her back stiffened. Her veins glowed faintly under her skin. Jack stepped back, stunned. "Ryla!" Her eyes flew open, brighter than ever. She gasped and screamed, not in pain, in shock. Her fingers dug into the blanket. Her heart, once slow and quiet, began to race, faster, warmer. For the first time in her life, her body generated heat on its own. She sat up, sweating. "I feel hot." Jack reached forward. "Easy. You're okay." She grabbed his hand, hard. "Feel alive." Moments passed before she calmed down. Jack gave her water. She drank it all in one go. Her breath slowed. Her skin now glowed softly with life. She looked at him, eyes wide. "Is this what it means to be human?" Jack shook his head. "No, this is what it means to want to live." They sat together, the last of the heat surrounding them like a fading bubble. Ryla stared at her hands. "In my world, the heart is made of ice. We are taught to feel nothing. But mine, it's burning now." Jack smiled gently. "That's your snow heart waking up." She looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. "I was never supposed to exist. I was abandoned, left to freeze." He touched her face softly. "But you do exist, and you're not alone." Suddenly, she leaned in. Not with panic, not with pain, but with purpose. She pressed her forehead to his just like before. "I don't know your ways," she whispered. "But in mine, this means I am yours." Jack felt something deep stir in his chest. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His hand closed over hers. And in that moment, 2 beings from 2 different worlds held each other. Not as strangers, not as survivor and savior, but as something more. Outside, the frost began to break. Inside, the snow heart began to beat. The sky above Zerath cleared for the first time in weeks. The storm was gone. The wind was silent. The ice no longer screamed. Inside the half-buried shelter, Jack opened the hatch and looked out. Blinding light reflected off the endless snow, but something felt different now. It wasn't just the weather. It was her. Ryla stepped beside him, no longer trembling, no longer wrapped in fear. Her back was straight. Her violet eyes shone not from cold but from choice. She wore Jack's thermal jacket over her alien dress. Her feet still touched frozen ground, but her soul was warmer than ever before. "I never thought I'd walk on this snow again," she said softly. Jack looked at her with a smile. "And now?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the snow and pulled out a shard of old frost steel, a piece of her people's past. She held it up, then dropped it. "I'm not theirs anymore," she whispered. "I belong to something new." News had spread faster than the winds. The frost guards returned to her people with stories they didn't know how to explain. The frozen girl survived. She bonded with a human. She bled. She healed. She stood. Some called it heresy. Others called it prophecy. But when Ryla walked through the icy gates of her city with Jack at her side, not a single voice spoke against her. They only watched and listened. Before the elders, Ryla stood without fear. Her voice was strong. "I was left in the ice to die. You believed silence was strength. But this human spoke to me even when I had no words." She looked at Jack. "He gave me warmth. Not just to survive, but to feel. You feared emotion, but emotion made me rise." One of the elders scowled. "You shame us with weakness." She stepped forward. "No, I shame you with truth." Another whispered. "Then what do you ask, Ryla of the melted heart?" She took Jack's hand and raised it before all. "I ask for exile, so I may begin again." Gasps. Exile was worse than death, but Ryla smiled. "Exile, with him, is a freedom I never had with you." The gates opened once more, and they walked away, hand in hand. Months passed. Far beyond the frozen cities, in the warmth of the southern valleys of Zerath, a new settlement began, alien and human, cold-born and fire-hearted. They built it from scraps and broken dreams. They called it Virelon, a name from her ancient language. It meant the place where snow cannot enter. And there, beneath new stars, Ryla lived. Not as a forgotten daughter, not as a frozen soul, but as a symbol of what happens when ice meets warmth and melts willingly. One evening, she sat beside Jack near a small fire, her head on his shoulder, his fingers in hers. She looked up and whispered, "The ice never touched me again." Jack smiled. "It never will."